Hello, my friends, and welcome to continued coverage of GP Toronto. The format is modern, and I'm here in the booth with Eduardo Sajgalik. My name's Riley Knight, and we are checking in with another Canadian superstar here. It is Pascal Maynard. He's playing against Jarvis here. Jeskai Breach versus Burn. Eduardo, you've played a lot of modern in recent times. How is this matchup going to shape up?
Generally, this matchup comes down to the burn decks tend to be pretty consistent in what they do, so it comes down to the exact builds that the Jeskai players decide to run. The general rule, the more Lightning Helix you have, the better your chances against burn. And as Pascal, I believe, plays a none, this is actually going to be a pretty rough match for him in game one. He is playing Jeskai Breach, so his game plan is going to be to Fruit the Breach and Emrakul. So Pascal is going to do as best as he can to get the 5 lands and win the game from that position, since that's his best chance to beat Jarvis.
Now, Maynard is playing a bit of an interesting twist on this archetype because he's also playing Nahiri. Now, we've seen Nahiri, we've seen Harbinger Jeskai in months and well, even years past, really, and sort of a bit of a flash in the pan. Didn't stick around for long, but I caught up with Pascal Maynard. Actually, I got a cab with him from the airport to the venue on Friday, and he was talking about how he really likes the two angles of attack this deck has. It can either grind them out with a Nahiri, which is also great, just the incidental splash damage against so much of the format, but also 5 mana, a lot of people aren't expecting, especially if it looks like you're playing a Jeskai control game, to just go 5 mana instant speed, slap in an Emrakul.
Right. This deck kind of had a breakout performance at GP Oklahoma. However, actually I got a chance to play against the person who at the Pro Tour who played the deck. I can't recall, but I believe Nahiri is something that Pascal has added. It gives him that grinding angle of attack, as you mentioned. But yeah, if we're looking at what happened in the game here, the fact that Pascal missed his third land drop puts him way behind.
Unfortunately, yes, he's doing his best to keep himself in it here, as one of the Rift Bolts was remanded. Maynard hunting for that third land. Instead finds a 15 drop off the top of his library. Not exactly where you want to be here. At 8-2, Maynard has had to dig in here, dig in his heels. He's wanting to keep himself in contention for top 8. And Jarvis as well on mass drop as well. He's also got his work cut out for him. These guys can't really give away another loss here, Eduardo.
Nope, no losses to give. Although, interestingly, Jarvis gave all his losses before joining the tournament. Testing online, he went 0-9 in modern leagues just before joining the tournament. Oh, really?
Yes. Oh, okay, sure. So he just shook out all the bad ones, huh?
Exactly.
That's it. Yeah, took out the trash nice and early and then rocked up to get things done. Jarvis, as we have a look at his list, not too much going on in here that's of particular note. Main deck, Grim Lava Mance is in a good spot against many of the creature decks in the format. Down to 3 Helices and 3 Skull Cracks, but apart from that, it is clean 4-ofs all the way down. Snapcaster Mage, looks like it's on the old unfortunate Ambush Viper mode here, but Jarvis is going to have something to say about that. Even with a Goblin Guide, Pascal cannot draw that third land here, Eduardo.
Yeah, when essentially packing it up, missing that land drop, taking incidental damage. This matchup is already pretty difficult pre-board, since Pascal, it is difficult for Pascal to buy time plus get to 5 lands against a deck like Burn. So Pascal in this difficult position, essentially pre-board.
Maynard making it a little bit harder for himself as well. As far as I can see, 0 copies of Lightning Helix, which is often a great way to, I mean, more or less, especially if you snipe one of their creatures, it's kind of a 2-for-1 because it gains you that 3 life. But Pascal Maynard choosing not to bring that card to the tournament.
Right. So Pascal essentially choosing to play a deck that is better against the mid-range decks and the control decks, but in the process sacrificing precious percentage points against the aggro decks. Here Pascal decided to essentially, he has 2 copies of Anger of the Gods. He has a Braid in the sideboard. So he does have ways to deal with creatures, but not to the burn plan that Jarvis is really bringing to the table. The most key card Pascal has for his post-board games are these 2 copies of Leyline of Sanctity.
Yeah, 2 copies of them, and if one's in the opening hand, it's going to be very difficult for Jarvis to navigate that. In his sideboard, I mean, we're looking at a deck that is not playing, I don't think, any green cards at all. This is straight up Boros Burn here. There's no Destructive Revelries in the sideboard here. So, I mean, what's Jarvis' angle against something like a Leyline?
Play some creatures and use Boros Charm to double strike them.
Is that really it, is it? Wow. Yeah. All right. Well, that's the way that it's going to get done here. If Maynard can find those ley lines. 4 mana is a big ask. Pascal really wants them in his opening hand.
Indeed. If Pascal like slams in on turn 4, it's probably going to be too late, so it needs to come down for the pregame. Jarvis probably in these post-board games, not going to board much. I think the 2 Shrine of Burning Rage are good in a matchup like this because they're a pretty hefty burn spell. But he doesn't need to bring much. Maybe if he believes Pascal played Lightning Helixes, would board in the Skullcrack. If he actually knew the list, chances are he would actually take them out since there's only a Blessed Alliance to gain life. So yeah, here, this is really Pascal trying to have a better post-board match. The Dispels also help a lot.
Yeah, Dispels. I can see a Celestial Purge has random upside against some of the creatures. I mean, you've got to do what you got to do, right?
Yeah, exactly. But especially with those ley lines, the creatures are probably going to be Jarvis's best line to victory. Pascal has a lot of cheap removal for the creatures, but the fact that Goblin Guide and Eidolon and Monastery Swift Spear all kind of deal damage because either they have haste or an ability that allows them to do that, means that Pascal really has to close the game. If he doesn't have Leyline of Sanctity, he needs a way to close the game down. Otherwise, Jarvis is going to draw more burn spells and eventually win the match. So here, I would say that even in post-board games, Jarvis is slightly favored. But if Pascal has a Leyline, then the advantage bar just literally does a full 180.
Just flips right over onto the other side there for Maynard here. Well, we'll see how things go as both players have configured themselves for the post-board game. Bit of a double pile shuffle going on for your viewing pleasure, ladies and gentlemen. And it's certainly our pleasure to bring it to you. Riley Knight, Eduardo Sajkalik for MTG Red Zone here with continued coverage of Grand Prix Toronto. Bit of creep. I'll start that one from the top. Been a pretty cruisy morning for you and me, Eduardo. A leisurely breakfast. Cruise down through the snow to the venue, and now we're ready to get well and truly stuck in. Modern at probably the best position we've seen it in recent years. Really, would you agree with that, Eduardo?
I think that the way the Modern format is positioned at the moment is the envy of what any TCG would want a format to be. There's a ton of viable decks. People can play different strategies. I mean, I streamed 30 decks. I announced it, and I had people complaining I wasn't running their deck.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That was the first piece of feedback. Why are you not playing my deck?
Because there are that many viable decks, as we head down. I mean, the Tier 1 list of Tier 1 decks is already staggeringly huge, but plenty of viable decks at Tier 1.5, Tier 2, and a Leyline of Sanctity for Pascal Maynard. That is going to be a big game changer here. Jarvis, you not going to be happy to see that on turn 0.
No, and this totally flips the matchup right there. It looks insane, and this is maybe one of the criticisms that people have about Modern as a format.
And a valid one too, I would say.
Yeah. That said, Jarvis did not decide to bring in any copies of Destructive Revelry, so this is also Jarvis's deck-building decision that might punish him. He probably wouldn't have boarded in a max number, like maybe 1 or 2, but it would have given him that out.
And this is, I think, we talk about how great Modern is and how it's in a very, very good spot. But, I mean, look, there are very legitimate criticisms of the format, and one is the nature of these silver bullet sideboard cards. You can't disagree with it. Some matchups are so heavily dependent on whether a player does or doesn't draw their sideboard cards. As we see another one on the top of Pascal Maynard's library in Celestial Purge. Clean answer to the Goblin Guide. You'd think that Maynard here firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, but it's really based on that Leyline of Sanctity because it deals with all the burn spells. Pascal is already well set up to deal with the creatures, playing a Snapcaster Lightning Bolt Path deck, so that's not really the issue. Pascal can easily deal with Jarvis's creatures. The main issue is that Pascal can't deal with the top of Jarvis's library too easily. There are some Dispels, there's a tiny bit of counter magic. But once you have Leyline, you're protected and way, way ahead. It's actually incredible at which point the matchup flips over this card.
Scalding Ton now for Pascal Maynard, not having issues with mana so far here as Goblin Guide gets in again. Let's have a look. Oh, just the casual Emrakul on the top. So Maynard will be happy to be able to shuffle that one away.
Right. Yes. Here, the interesting point that you kind of mentioned is that you can see the Goblin Guide attack and decide if you want to draw the top card or not. So you can use Goblin Guide as a reverse Lantern of Insight, so to speak. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, a Lantern of Outside.
Exactly.
So Maynard here does have the option to get rid of this Goblin Guide, but he's got a Spell Snare in hand, which I think he'll be looking to snag an Eidolon with the Eidolon of the Great Revel. Another way for Jarvis. Actually, does the Eidolon work through the line of Sanctity?
Yes. So it does. It doesn't target. So
okay.
It's just a trigger that happens when the player casts a spell. Interestingly, Spell Snare is really good against burn because they have so many 2-damage burn spells. But here, as you say, it will essentially only counter Eidolon Or if Jarvis later has a lot of creatures and Pascal angers, countering a Boros Charm that would indestructible Jarvis's team. So Spell Snare a really powerful card just because it interacts so cleanly against a lot of Jarvis's cards. But again, that Leyline, essentially what Leyline does is it makes about half of Jarvis's deck blanks, and that's what changes the matchup so much. You go from your average card being worth 2 damage to your average card being worth 1 damage, and that's not how your burn deck is going to win your match.
Maynard shuffling away that copy of Emrakul there. And now at end of turn, looks like we're going to see this Celestial Purge deployed. All these spicy one-offs in Maynard's sideboard obviously made all the better. You know, we're looking at things like a Braid, Celestial Purge, what have you, all made so much better by the fact that Snapcaster Mage is a 4-of in his list.
Right, and also what the other 4-ofs, Opt, Serum Visions, Remand, you go through a huge portion of your library, and that allows you to find these post-board sideboard cards. I will note that Remand is boarded out for this matchup. It's extremely poor in matchups where you are essentially striving to, card advantage your opponent rather than tempo them out. And I do want to mention that Pascal did... You saw the Emrakul earlier. That alludes back to my point that Pascal has to close down the game, and his best way to close down the game is through the Breach Emrakul. So he won't. He might take out a copy or 2 of these cards, but he will keep it in because he has to close down the game so that Jarvis can't top deck in non-Leyline games.
Snapcaster Mage now going to flash back a Serum Visions here. Looks like Jarvis Yu has a response. Let's see what Yu is up to here.
Well, you have about 5 cards in your hand that do nothing except target a creature, so at this point you might as well kill the Snapcaster Mage.
Just snap it straight off there. Looking for that F6 value here. That's what Yu's all about. And Lightning Helix is going to buffer his life total while knocking down Tiago Chan. Maynard on 12. Now, you'd think against a burn opponent with a full grip, that's pretty tenuous, but again, this Leyline of Sanctity working overtime. Jarvis Yu opting to just play straight Boros. This is one of the weaknesses of not playing green.
Right, the basic criteria to playing green, Destructive Revelry, and not having access to that. It isn't at its best in a matchup like this, even though Leyline is so oppressive that a copy or 2 is okay. But Pascal does have answers like the Spell and Spell Snare, so it's still even awkward if he had access to it. One thing that's kind of interesting here, from Jarvis's perspective, was deciding to kill the Snapcaster Mage, essentially in response to the Serum Visions working, while Pascal had a fetch land. Because Pascal had a fetch land, I think that from Pascal's position, I would have aimed to crack the fetch first to get full value from that Serum Visions, and Jarvis should have done the same. He should have waited for the Serum Visions to resolve before Lightning Helixing the Snap.
Instead of just going for that F6 there.
Yes, because then Pascal would shuffle cards and not get full value from Serum Visions.
So Maynard continuing to develop his plan, and he can sit pretty behind this Leyline of Sanctity, as we've mentioned. Jarvis Yu not even playing any copies of Wear Tear in the sideboard, which means that I've got his 75 in front of me, and I cannot see a way for him to remove it.
Nope. And actually, one of the cards that might be really nice to have access to would have been Deflecting Palm. That would be sweet.
Oh, yeah.
But unfortunately, it doesn't really work when Emrakul gets rid of all your lands to some degree.
So once again here, Jarvis Yu is keeping the board clear for on Maynard's side of things. He's continuing to gain value, flashing back those cantrips and just churning through his deck here, slowly but surely building towards the win that at this stage you would say is close to inevitable.
I would say it's inevitable, just straight up. I think Pascal is going to kill every creature, and it's going to be very hard for Jarvis to get through. That being said, it seems like Pascal only has Through the Breach and a land in hand. I guess suspending the Rift Bolt in case of a Sorcery Speed Snapcaster Mage here, since Jarvis can just target himself at worst case scenario.
Seems curious, but Yu is sitting on 23 lives, so maybe he's not too worried. As we see now, Pascal Maynard on 9 ships, has an opt in hand in addition to Through the Breach. This is the namesake card of the deck, and the idea, of course, being that you can whack in an Emrakul at instant speed when your opponent is least expecting it, and get him dead nice and quick. Second Leyline of Sanctity here for Maynard. He'll probably want to shuffle that one away, considering that the first one is safe as houses. And Celestial Colonnade the play here for you. Oh, sorry, for Maynard.
Right. And here you can see basically you going, well, these are not doing anything else, so I might as well kill your Colonnade with it and try to get damage through with my Goblin Guide. And this is actually fascinating for me because Jarvis managed to get a very creature-heavy draw, and Pascal is flooding a bit. So if Pascal is still in a good position, but if with this opt and his draw step he cannot get a removal spell, then he's going to be in trouble potentially. However, Pascal's deck being full of removal spells means that this is probably wishful thinking.
Opt now for Maynard. After that Celestial Colonnade hits the bin. Double Lightning Bolt from you to take care of the 4/4.
Yeah, and here I saw that Emrakul go in, so let's go. Let's 15.
Okay. This will make things a lot easier here. Maynard slams the Emrakul into play thanks to the Through the Breach. Jarvis has to sacrifice 6 permanents, but hey, look at this. He's going to play it out. Takes 15. And Maynard shuffles his graveyard back into his library along with that Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn. Now Jarvis with 5 life, 0 permanents, and how many cards in hand? 3 or 4?
3, and at least 2 of them do nothing.
All right, well, if you can find a creature, Goblin Guide or a Monastery Swift Spear, and get it through, that's his way forward here. But Maynard has to find a way to deal the final 5 points of damage, and with a deck with Electrolyzers and Lightning Bolts, you wouldn't think it would be too difficult here for Maynard to put the finishing touches on. Cryptic Command off the top here for Maynard.
Yeah, this is academic at this point. There we go, Snapcaster Mage. Obviously the graveyard was emptied because that Emrakul went to the graveyard, but Snapcasters plus Electrolyze plus the attack.
Yep, easy enough there. So the 2-1 is going to come through for the final points of damage as we see Electrolyze knock Jarvis down to 1. So Pascal Maynard picking up a pretty handy win there, although props there to Jarvis for digging in very deep in the face of a turn 0 Leyline of Sanctity. Very difficult thing for a burn player to overcome, especially with no enchant removal. It was closer than you might think there, Eduardo, but obviously Maynard never being in too much trouble.
Right, but the fact that it was closer than it appeared means that the matchup for burn is extraordinarily favored without that Leyline of Sanctity. So something we mentioned earlier, the fact that Jarvis doesn't have Deflecting Palm. Actually, Deflecting Palm does work. You can float the mana, and essentially once Emrakul attacks, just go like, okay, well, that Emrakul's attacking, so you're taking that 15.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't have access to the card. So yeah, Jarvis here knows that he can't deal with Leyline, so he's going to have to just hope that Pascal doesn't have it. Favor keeping creature-heavy hands, which are not normally necessarily the best against Jeskai's suite of Lightning Bolts and Path to Exiles. But yes, essentially, Jarvis is hoping, please don't have a Leyline of Sanctity. Please don't have a Leyline of Sanctity.
Please don't draw that Leyline of Sanctity here. And Maynard, I mean, how aggressively does he mulligan towards it? If he's got a slow but kind of decent 7, does he just go down to 6 just to find that enchantment?
I would argue that if Pascal's hand is anything but premium and doesn't contain Leyline, he should probably throw it back. And that's actually one of the greatest weaknesses of these very powerful sideboard cards, such as Leyline of Sanctity, Stony Silence. People aggressively mulligan to these cards, and that means that post-board, the average hand from those decks is much weaker since they're more likely to go down for these premium cards. So if you're playing a deck that is weak to a very specific card like a Leyline of Sanctity or Stony Silence, and you can engineer your sideboard to not care about these cards, then you can have a really high win percentage post-board games. So if you're playing a deck that's, say, really weak to Stony Silence, and you can find a way around it, I strongly advise you do, because then it attacks on an angle that is different and forces your opponent into a hole where they're trying to mulligan for the Stony Silence, and they lose to your other card.
Yeah. It's a great way to reposition yourself post-board. Anticipate what your opponent's hate cards will be. Shore up those weaknesses against those cards. We see this out of Storm. Storm brings in things like pieces of the puzzle, which isn't as reliant on graveyard synergies here. Goblin Guide, turn number 1 for Jarvis. Perfect start for him. And Maynard with a fresh grip. I mean, even this is the situation now. Even if Goblin Guide hits, he's in the old discard mode.
Well, he probably will draw the land and then use a Lightning Bolt or Path to Exile if needed.
Oh, does he have one in hand there?
We're going to find out. I believe
Steam Vents off the top.
Yes, Lightning Bolt.
Okay, all right. So Maynard not having to disc. That's the ultimate salt. That's the hugest rub-ins there when Goblin Guide gets you for 2 and you don't even get the card advantage to go with it. Oh, mate.
The main issue here is that, I mean, you can see that he would not have kept a hand without Bolt or Path if it didn't contain Leyline, because he needs to interact from turn 1, on turn 2, on turn 3. Basically, every time Jarvis's creatures hit for 2 damage, they're doing their job, and if they ever hit for more than 2, they've done overtime, overwork, and that puts Jarvis further and further ahead in the matchup like this. The fact that Pascal doesn't have Lightning Helix, again, means that it's very hard for him outside of a card like Blessed Alliance to get out of range, which means that he's pretty at the mercy of Jarvis's top decks.
So, Goblin Guide only in for 2 there after eating a Lightning Bolt. Jarvis Yu, however, with another play. It's going to be a Shrine of Burning Rage here.
Yeah, and Shrine of Burning Rage is the perfect card against these control decks. It's essentially, if your metagame is full of cards like Death Shadow and these Jeskai control decks, and you like to play Burn, I would strongly recommend having 2 to 3 copies of Shrine. I think 4 might be going a little overboard, but it's a really strong plan against these mid-range control decks, since the Shrine just keeps ticking up and up and up, and eventually offloading a 7 or 8 damage burst at the end of the game. Because, you know, once you take 8, the game is ending.
Yeah. That'll be how it goes there. Maynard, a basic heavy draw for him. You can see what looks like a snow-covered mountain in hand as well. Flooded Strand. So not going to have an issue with his mana so far. And now with this Spell Snare in hand as well, he's got a little bit of insurance. I can see Eidolon in Jarvis Yu's hand. Grim Lavamancer, his opening play, however.
This is kind of an interesting spot for Jarvis. Essentially, Maynard passed with Island Mountain. And I would have put Maynard on having at least another land in hand. You know about the Steam events. Which means to me that Maynard probably has access to 2 spells. And when he has access to 2 spells, I wonder how you want to play around that, because one of Jarvis's potential best plays was to literally pass the turn here, which seems counterintuitive, but then it takes Maynard's whole turn and he's not developing his mana. So yeah, and you can see kind of the drawback here of not doing so. He hits a Spell Snare and goes into Pascal's line. If Pascal, there we go, has another fetch land or untapped land, he could have access to Snapcaster plus Spell Snare or Lightning Bolt. So by not playing there, you force the action on just Lightning Bolt, which is pretty mediocre against, which was not the best line against Eidolon.
Serum Visions here for Pascal Maynard. Draws a Hallowed Fountain, still in the process of scrying here.
Yeah. And one critical card that Pascal just has right now is access to a Braid. He only has 1 copy of the card, and the fact that that can kill the Shrine means that Jarvis's cards now only deal the exact damage that is printed on them, rather than additional +1 and +1 per upkeep. So losing the Shrine here is actually a huge blow to Jarvis.
And a Braid is a great play for Maynard from a general sense. Just bringing that in against Burn, obviously excellent. 3 damage to a creature is exactly where you want to be. But randomly hosing the Shrines, if they're going to bring them in. I mean, not all Burn players play them, but it's a great piece of technology against Burn. Even if it is a little slower for a removal spell, the utility, more than happy to pay that tax for it. Yeah. Maynard has done a great job of defending his life total. He's on 17. Jarvis Yu with 2 cards in hand. I mean, he does have an active Grim Lavamancer, but Yu's going to have to string together some draws. He's flooded out a little bit on 4 lands here, Eduardo.
Yeah, and this was actually something I wanted to bring up when I walked around the floor earlier. I saw a player keep in a Stomping Ground versus a black-green mid-range deck. And post-board, Burn versus these control decks and these mid-range decks tends to work into an attrition mode. So it's often correct to board out a land to essentially make sure you're drawing more spells in your match, since the games tend to go longer. One thing that's a bit weird here is that Grim Lavamancer alive through an Electrolyze?
I think a Boros Charm was cast to make it indestructible here. Maybe Yu does really value this little 1/1 as a way forward for him later into the game. But yeah, that's one way to prevent the Electrolyze from getting the job done. Opt here for Maynard.
Yeah. That was an extraordinarily... I think that was a very smart play. Because the Grim Lavamancer is always going to deal 2 damage if it survives here. So the Boros Charm is at least dealing half its damage by making it indestructible. And you're forcing Pascal to deal with this Grim Lavamancer at some point down the line when he's already used quite a few removal spells. So it's a really interesting line, I think, here. I'm not sure if it's correct or not. It's actually a pretty close call. But you're at least dealing 2 damage, and if you ever deal another time with Grim Lavamancer, you're at least doing what the Bolt wanted to do. The Boros Charm wanted to do. And yeah.
Well, this time, this Bolt is going to do what Bolt does best here and take care of Grim Lavamancer once and for all. But yeah, I mean, it's a good point you make. A single other activation from that Grim Lavamancer would have sort of replaced the Boros Charm there. But now Snapcaster Mage starts to get in. And Pascal Maynard looks to start to turn the tables here. Steam Vents entering play tapped. He's not taken a point of damage off those shock lands.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, Jarvis is flooding horribly.
Yeah, 6 lands is so many on a deck that effectively can function on 2.
Yeah, and this is the biggest argument is to board out land. I think more on the draw than on the play, to be honest. So I think it's okay. But it's something that people don't do enough is like considering that post-board your matchup may change, so it's worth boarding in or out a land in certain matchups or situations if you can.
Maynard happy enough to continue to hit his land drops with a nice full hand. He's got plenty of action through the breach. He's still holding onto that snow-covered island. Maybe he's flooding out just a little bit here as well. Skullcrack down to 7 for Maynard. Jarvis Siow, 3 cards in hand.
Right. Here also Pascal having access to Blessed Alliance, basically countering a future Boros Charm. It is a one-off in his list, and it's going to be extremely powerful in this situation.
If he can find a Snapcaster Mage as well, it's going to really get some work done. So, Rift Bolt on the stack.
Yeah, and this is where things get a little interesting, because Pascal going to 4 leaves him in lethal range if he doesn't respond with Blessed Alliance. But if Jarvis has access to another Skullcrack here, that's really dangerous for Pascal, because then he would go to 1, not get the life gain from Blessed Alliance, and be in an extraordinarily dangerous position. So this is really hard for Pascal.
He really, really needs that Blessed Alliance to resolve here.
Well, it's definitely going to resolve no matter what. It's just, is it going to do something?
Sorry, that's yeah, sure. He really needs that 4 extra life. That's his way forward. On 7, down to 4 now.
Here, I might have liked using the Blessed Alliance just on upkeep, since that's the point where Jarvis will have the minimum amount of spells.
Prevent him from perhaps top decking that Skullcrack here. So Maynard, I think he's going for the value play here.
Yeah,
we may see an escalated Blessed Alliance here. Wow, for the full 6.
Might as well untap that Snapcaster for value. But yeah, there you go, the Skullcrack.
Oh no.
And yeah, that puts Pascal in a really tough spot. Like, he wanted the full value to kill the creature, but because he could have. It's actually kind of rough here, because Skullcrack beats you and not much else does. So yeah, here Pascal, mercy of anything that Jarvis can draw, since he has no counter magic, I believe. So we're going down to good old-fashioned top decks.
This is close. A single Celestial Colonnade would have done it here for Maynard as well, with you on 4 life after that Snapcaster Mage attack. Oh, and passes the turn. Jarvis Siow, does he have the card he needs to close this game out? Maynard hits him down to 2. This is as close as it gets. A single turn either way. 1 draw step from Jarvis Siow, and it is Lava Spike off the top. Pascal Maynard has to reveal his hand, which is a stone cold Blankski, unfortunately for him. So Maynard going down to X and 3, but Jarvis Siow, fans around the world rejoicing that the Burn player improves to 9 and 2 after a round 11 victory. Congratulations to him, and commiserations to Pascal Maynard, the hometown hero, well, the home country hero at least, the boy from Quebec City. It's been a cracking match there. We didn't quite get to see the breach combo on full steam, but Pascal Maynard still doing his very best to keep himself in it here. So we move now to one of our back tables, and it is Braun-Duin and twist ending. M. Night, Shyla, Myla, bloody ding dong twist ending here. He's not the one playing opposite at the Ghost Council. It is Matt West with Esper, Goryo's Vengeance. I know you love this deck, Eduardo. Talk us through it, mate.
This deck is so sweet. Essentially, it is a combo control deck. It uses multiple engines. It uses Goryo's Vengeance more as a value card rather than ending the game like you might see in Gristle Shoalbrand with Gristlebrand or Borborygmos. Here you're trying to Goryo's Vengeance either a Jace Vryn's Prodigy, since you can transform it into a Planeswalker and it stays in play, or an Obsidat. Again, you exile it, but you choose the exile effect. So basically, using your Goryo's Vengeance as a value engine, and then using the rest of your deck to gain value as a control deck. Lingering Souls, Collective Brutality, Inquisition of Kozilek with the 1 Snapcaster, Gifts Ungiven, with Elishnorn and Iona Unburial Rites. It's a combo control deck that you don't see much of, and here you can see the Lantern lock essentially not functioning because Ensnaring Bridge doesn't stop Obzidad's draining ability.
No, that's true. Now, Braun-Duin is doing a great job in terms of keeping that 5-fire from attacking, but it looks like he's flooded out ferociously here with a huge number of lands in play. Not a lot of other stuff going on here as Stony Silence enters the battlefield as well. And it looks like Braun-Duin is about to be hoisted by his own petard here as the Ghost Daddy continues to come back in, and he's giving his son a stern talking to here, waggling that finger around, sending him to his room. Oh, and just to finish things out in style, how about that? Obzidat Ghost Council up. No, excuse me. Braun-Duin says, no, mate. I was in fact using them. So a few more draw steps here for BBD in the phase of the Ghost Council.
Yeah, just flooding out horribly. When you don't have the Lantern Engine of Codex Shredder and Lantern of Insight, then you get into these situations where you can't control your draw step. And you flood out horribly. Oh, and yeah, this Lingering Souls is also horrific for BBD since he does have a Thoughtseize in hand. So I guess he could play it and go to 0, but scooping it up is just as good.
That's the way that it goes there for Braun-Duin, unfortunately for him. But congratulations to Matt West after winning game number 2 and equalizing 1-1. Now, if there is a man in this room I would trust to navigate a matchup with the OGC, it would, of course, be Braun-Duin. We all know how much he loves the card, but he has fallen to the dark side, ladies and gentlemen, playing Lantern Control. I caught up with him earlier in the backstage area before, and I tell you what, he's just like, he's Anakin Skywalker at the end of episode 3. He's loving it. He's loving it. He's fallen straight to the dark side, and he can't believe his luck. He's just full of this power, and it's been very sad to see our sweet boy, fall to evil like this, but he's embracing it wholeheartedly, and with an X-2 record, looking to really get it done here.
Yeah, but he's combating old school evil.
Oh yeah, This is like Eldritch evil. This is like, books, bloodstained books bound with human skin evil. Esper Goryo's vengeance, like Grizzlebrand, Obzidaddy. This is how we get evil done.
Not quite the big Gristle Daddy, but yeah, Obzidat Ghost Council. That's where we want to be. The Ghost Council against Lantern, it just convenes every time. It won't send a message, but essentially we'll convene and we'll reconvene and we'll reconvene. Yeah. Oh, sorry, you're dead.
Yeah. It's death by 1,000 Obzidat triggers here. Or not quite 1,000, death by 10 of them. But still, Braun-Duin got his work cut out for him here. I mean, he does have outs to Obzidat, of course. Witchbane Orb is immediately comes to mind there because the Ghost Council does target.
Right, as does Leyline of Sanctity. Leyline of Sanctity is also a good answer to it. So, again, the Lantern Control decks, the way that you play that deck is you figure out what your opponent's ways to win are, and you surgically get rid of them one by one. So, Witchbane Orb and Leyline shut down that Obzidat line, and then the rest of the Lantern Engine tries to shut down what the Esper Goryo's Vengeance deck is doing. Just to kind of set the stage for this post-board game, Esper Goryo's Vengeance, usually bringing in the Stony Silences. Might bring in Ruined Halo against something like Codex Shredder. Detention Sphere, like Disenchants. Everything that gets rid of a permanent in play is great. And he's probably going to get rid of, the good old Go for the Throat is probably not at its best in this matchup. Fatal Push, Path to Exile, those are also going away.
Get him out of here.
Yep. While BBT is probably going to cut several pieces of his engine, probably cutting a bridge and a number of other cards, but moving towards those Abrupt Decays to answer a lot of these troublesome enchantments. The Leyline of Sanctity potentially to answer essentially the opposite. Although
he also Gifts Ungiven.
Yes, it does answer gifts.
It's a super, super weird interaction, but making yourself hexproof actually means that gifts players don't have a target for the gifts.
Well, essentially, you don't have someone to give you gifts.
No, that's it. Yeah,
you're like, look, I don't want to give you anything here.
I'm throwing this party, and you're like, sorry, buddy, that invitation is going to bounce off me. I'm hexproof. Yeah, my Leyline of Sanctity just interrupts the postman. He's knocking on the door trying to get me in. No gifts for you, my friend.
He's not hoping. Like the Field of Flowers just blocks the postman.
Yeah, that's it. And the invitation isn't coming through. But I mean, look, both players got to do some repositioning post board for sure. We saw that Matt West did bring in cards like Detention Sphere, for example, as you mentioned. Anything that tussles with the permanence that BBD is looking to leverage. I mean, is the Lantern player out for the count here? Is it a bit closer than we think? I mean, Obzidat's a huge game, but I mean, this isn't the only angle that the Esper deck can attack on.
I was trying to figure out. I would say that, especially with the mulligan here, the Lantern player is probably slightly favored. As long as they can keep an early Stony Silence off the board with a discard spell or an Abrupt Decay. So I would speculate that with Gravedigger's Cage and the number of answers, that the Lantern player is slightly favored. But because the Esper's Goryo's Vengeance can operate at instant speed, attack from a wide variety of angles, it's a closer matchup than most would be.
So let's have a look here. Serum Vision's going to start things off for Matt West now.
Yeah. And a really sweet card in BBD's hand while we're waiting here. Tezzeret, Agent of Bolas.
So Matt West opening the game even though Braun-Duin won the last one. Did Braun-Duin put him on the play?
Yeah, so something a little weird if you ever look into Lantern guides. There is a large number of matchups where they recommend that you draw.
Is that right?
Yes. And the rationale for those are matchups where specific cards matter. So you're trying to attrition them. Essentially, matchups where you don't die early would be the best equivalent here.
So Mox Opal, Glimmer Void, and an Inquisition of Kozilek to kick things off here for Brian Braun-Duin. No Leyline of Sanctity to start for him as he looks at a hand that is, well, pretty well set up against an Inquisition, although Jace Vryn's Prodigy is obviously the pick here for BBD. Not a great play to snag the Lingering Souls there.
No, indeed. Still getting those souls and even being able to cast it on turn 2. Taking the Jace, though, is great. Jace against the Lantern decks, that extra card draw allowing them to get away from the Lantern lock, plus being able to flashback spells like Serum Visions for value. I think Jace would have been quite a problem, actually, for BBD down the line, so it's good that he snags him on turn 2 and prevents that value.
Matt West still does have that Gifts Ungiven, however, and that's going to be a problem for Braun-Duin if he can't find a way forward. Inquisition going to take care of this Lingering Souls as well. So West, without a play on turn 2, is going to have, can pick his poison for turn number 3 as a Codex Shredder enters the battlefield for Big Daddy BBD.
Yeah, and interestingly, last turn, you saw that BBD was pretty happy to go Glimmer Void into Mox Opal and no other artifacts. I'm not sure he knows that Matt West has this enchant, but most of these white decks rely on Stony Silence rather than permanent removal. So that was why he felt pretty comfortable. But if Matt West had kept a disenchant on top, that would have been quite a blowout, actually.
That would have been ferocious, yeah. And he's playing 2 in the board, as you mentioned. So, yeah, the disenchant on the Opal would have meant that the Glimmer Void had to be sacrificed as well. And that would have been, lights out, huh?
Yeah, that would have been horrifying. Well, I'm not sure it would have been lights out since Matt can't really put a clock. And that's why BBD chooses to draw, is because Matt can't put a clock on him. So, look at this clock. Turn free, let's put 2 power on the board. That's not really going to get the pressure done against Lantern.
No, that's true. And we haven't seen that Busto start from Matt West where we have, a shallow grave type effect early on. It hasn't been how things have panned out as we see the 2 tokens sailing across.
Yeah, and another reason here to essentially decide to be on the draw is you're more likely to make your land drops that way because BBD just missed his 3rd one. He decided to be on the draw to mitigate the risk of that. Unfortunately, it still happened. That's the way the game works. But you want to be able to make your land drops early in these games. And also, it's pretty bad for BBD is probably a little disadvantage here. The fact that he couldn't even cast any 1 or 0 artifacts means that his hand is probably quite clunky and doesn't have a Lantern or another Shredder or another land or an Ancient Stirrings, which puts his hand to be a little clunky and giving Matt that time, which is not what you want to do, especially now that Matt is going for full souls.
Some more little spooky souls here coming into the battlefield. Looks like Brian Braun-Duin is holding an ensnaring bridge, however. So he's going to want to stop that onslaught as quickly as possible. 6 spooky spirits, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the haunted house.
Yeah, and Brian kills a spirit here, mainly because he has to empty his hand for bridge, and also it reduces the 6 spirit clock from 3 turns to 4 turns. And that's really important. Oh, the Gravedigger's Cage top decked after the 2 souls got flashbacked.
Yeah, nice. Really good timing on the part of BBD there. Should have drew that card 1 turn earlier, I think. Disenchant in the hand for Matt West as well. Now 5 spirits coming across, and it looks like even if BBD deploys this bridge, it's not going to be long for the world thanks to Matt West now.
Yeah, so I would put the advantage to Matt here. BBD's not locking Matt's draw step. Matt has a lot of effective cards in hand. And the fact that he doesn't have, that much mana. I mean, he has Mox Opal, but yeah. So here, going for a Whir of Invention for 1, it seems. So probably looking for a Lantern of Insight. Might be a Pyxis of Pandemonium as well. But I think with the Codex Shredder, the best play here is to get a Lantern, especially since you have Grafdigger's Cage that you believe is going to stick around. So it's okay to mill cards that affect the graveyard.
So Lantern of Insight, the namesake card of this deck. Scourge of the Pro Tour last. Well, that's actually probably a huge overstatement. It happened to win the Pro Tour after a number of very favourable top eight matchups there, but it certainly did put up the numbers at the top end of the tournament with Luis Salvato raising the trophy, pocketing that 50k, and doing very well with Lantern Control. But I think it's a deck. I mean, it's generated a lot of discussion, a lot of heated discussion over the past week or so, Eduardo, and maybe we'll get a chance to talk about the upcoming banned and restricted list. I know that you and I and many other people don't believe the deck should be banned, and I don't expect any action to be taken next Monday. I
don't either, and I think this game is going to be a class into why. Essentially, BBD is forced to sacrifice his Lantern just because his draw was going to be bad, so using it as kind of a refresh effect. He's letting Matt access to the Snapcaster Mage because of Grafdigger's Cage. But yeah, Matt decides, I don't even need the Snapcaster Mage. I'm just going to get a bad boy or girl into play. Let's just see what he might be going for, since BBD is down on mana. Yeah, Unburial Rites, Elesh Norn.
Yeah. So rather than the traditional 4 gifts pile, only selecting 2 cards, BBD has to pick 2 of them to put in the graveyard. He selects the only 2 options available, and this means that Matt West is going to be able to bring back the Grand Cenobite before very much longer. Great combination when you've already got 5 1/1s.
Yeah, although Matt has to wait a turn since that Grafdigger's Cage is in play.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not even sure it was correct to fire the gifts there, just because it doesn't necessarily accelerate your clock by more than a turn. And that Snapcaster Mage, once you disenchant Grafdiggers, is incredible. So if you did see a disenchant correctly, able to kill that Grafdigger's Cage, I think it would have been correct to draw the disenchant the Grafdiggers, draw the Snapcaster, be willing to disenchant something else, and be very far ahead.
So just sort of go for the value gifts rather than the combo gifts.
I actually just would not have even cast gifts
just
at all.
0 gifts.
I would have just gone disenchant, keep snap disenchant, and you probably wouldn't just free damage.
No gifts at all. Eduardo Sajkalek is starring in the upcoming performance of The Grinch 2, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, man. But yeah, here BBD is in a tough spot, simply because that bridge is not going to stop. So technically the bridge would stop Elesh Norn Pump Spirits, since he would have access to 2 cards in hand. Tezzeret, the problem is, while it does get him an extra card, that's not necessarily what BBD wants. It might get him some more life, since Matt West is pretty likely to want to get rid of a Tezzeret at 4, or like at least dial it down a notch. The Tezzeret might be the best line here. Just trying to get another 0 or 1, forcing Matt to make a decision as to whether he wants to kill it or kill BBD. So either BBD gets 2 cards off this Tezzeret. So Matt for sure is going to at least have a Spirit going to Tezzeret, since you can't let the ultimate resolve. Since that gains life.
So here is the Agent of Bolus, an interesting piece of trivia for basically no one other than myself and Ben Layton and the other people who gave it to me, James and PJ. The first ever Planeswalker I owned.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. You can quickly go and whack that little fact in the recycle bin, really. Here we go now with a second Mox Opal. Going to get that Pixis out as well. And the Agent of Bolus now deployed successfully, but Matt West once again in a commanding position. 5 1/1s taking to the skies. We're going to see the Grafdigger's Cage get disenchanted here, and West may now be in a position to just close out the game once and for all. 4 mana, Unburial Rites on Elesh Norn, and what can BBD do about it here?
Nothing.
Other than extend the hand. A concession comes from Braun-Duin in the face of that huge attack from Matt West. And I tell you what, Esper Goryo's Vengeance draws closer and closer to our top 8 here at GP Toronto at 8-2. Of course, West has to win out. But what an amazing achievement it would be to have a deck completely out of left field getting so late into day 2 here at GP Toronto. It's certainly been a pleasure to have your company so far, and we're looking forward to you sticking with us as we continue our exploration of the format during this tournament. Right now, however, we're going to go to a break. Stick around on the other side of this. Eduardo and I will be back for Time Walk Magic. We'll see you soon. Welcome back to the tournament floor here at GP Toronto. It's our pleasure to welcome you to continued coverage of this modern event. My name's Riley Knight, joined by, of course, Eduardo Sajgalik, the previous captain of the Canadian team, flying the flag for this Canadian GP. And I know your heart is overflowing with very mild and reserved Canadian pride here, my friends. It's great to have your company this weekend. We're going to get into some time walk magic right here and right now as we close out round number 11. And a bit of spice going on in this one here, Eduardo. What are we looking at?
We are looking at Gristle Schulbrand, a.k.a. one of the most dangerous modern decks.
Oh, yeah.
Win anytime, anywhere, instant speed.
Out of nowhere.
Yes.
And it's up against black-green mid-range, black-green rock strategies. We've come to know them as, and this is just about the safest deck you can possibly hope to play in Modern.
Good old rock. Nothing beats rock.
Nothing beats rock, except for, well, paper. But apart from that, it doesn't get beaten by anything. But what's going on with black-green mid-range? I mean, we hear decks like Abzan, Jund, rock decks. What are they all about?
So the biggest incentive to play black-green mid-range, all these decks are Tarmogoyf Thoughtseize decks. Mm-hmm. They look to go turn 1 discard, turn 2 big threat. The biggest change here with straight-up black-green, your mana is a little stronger. You get to play Hissing Quagmires and Treetop Villages. You take less damage from your lands, and you also have access to Field of Ruin, kind of the breakout star from Ixalan for Modern.
Mm-hmm.
A very innocent land, but anything but.
It's had a big impact. And on the other side of the battlefield, as we said, Jonathan Zhang is playing Grishlebrand. Looks like the black-green mid-range deck has done exactly what you said there. Thoughtseize into Tarmogoyf. Now, Jonathan Zhang here, after having cast a Knight's Whisper, this deck is just super, super weird here.
Yeah, so I'll explain kind of why Lucas took the Knight's Whisper with Thoughtseize. Is in a matchup like this, Lucas is looking to disrupt Jonathan from his plan, and the best way to do that when Jonathan's hand doesn't have the nuts, essentially like all the cards you would want in that situation, well, you have to stop the card draw because Lucas cannot win games where Jonathan essentially gets to his plan. So he's going to look to discard the most key pieces after the card draw because he knows that Jonathan is only living off the top of his deck. But yeah, for Jonathan's plan here, especially against black-green mid-range, you're looking to do one of two things. You're looking to Goryo's Vengeance a Gristlebrand into play, or to Through the Breach either Gristlebrand or Worldspine Worm. Worldspine Worm, in this deck normally, is a card you exile to Nourishing Shoal to gain 11, and that gain 11 translates into more cards because you're playing Gristlebrand. However, in this matchup, you can just Through the Breach that 15-15, deal 15, get free 5/5s, and then put your opponent in, well, almost dead.
Yeah, World of Pain. Yeah, that's how it works here. But, I mean, what can we say that plan A is to cheat a Gristlebrand into play, draw 7 cards, find the combo, which is, of course, Nourishing Shoal in addition to Worldspine Worm, and, again, gain 11 life, draw another 7 cards, find another copy of those 2 cards, and do it all over again until you've got a Borborygmus enraged, and then you can just chuck all your lands at your opponent's face after having drawn like 40 cards or whatever, and that should get it done. So a combo deck in the truest sense. Very, very little interaction, very little other ways to deal with opposing interaction or anything else like that in Grishlebrand. It is just a full-on pedal-to-the-metal combo deck.
Indeed, but it's a very counterintuitive one in that it can win at any point. It can even win in your own upkeep, from your own upkeep to your opponent's end step, because all your cards are instants. And yeah, here there was an interesting decision from Lucas to take the Goryo's Vengeance with the Collective Brutality when Jonathan had access to both Vengeance. And it's because Lucas was worried about Lightning Axe into top decking a Gristlebrand. Not something you could prevent for the next turn, but something that he might be able to prevent if he top decks another discard spell. That being said, I maybe would have liked to see him take the Through the Breach. And the reason for that is that if Jonathan had drawn 2 mana sources, he would have been able to get the 15-15 through and deal that damage. And that's why also I didn't like discarding necessarily the Maelstrom Pulse, because it was a clean way to deal with the 5/5, since 15 damage is not enough if you're cautious. But yeah, here Lucas's plan was to top deck a discard spell and use it, and here he got access to it, so now he's going to take that second Goryo's Vengeance most likely.
So Zhang having to think about things here. We may see Lightning Axe discarding one of these cards, something like a a world spine worm or what have you. But no, as it goes, we're just going to have the hand revealed. A Simian Spirit Guide there would have enabled some sort of silly shenanigans with extra mana. But at the end, looks like Lucas Siow is going to be able to have a look at Zhang's hand here and take what he pleases. Well, can't take the world spine worm, but.
Sure. Or the Through the Reach.
Through the Reach.
But that's important because now Jonathan only needs to draw an untapped land, and he gets that 15/15 in play, and Lucas got rid of his Maelstrom Pulse. So if Jonathan draws any untapped land here, he gets to essentially probably go on from there to win the game. And this is why I wasn't necessarily a fan of taking that Goryo's Vengeance, because there was a second one. I think in the dark you would, but in this spot it might have been better to take the Through the Reach, because now if he had, that wouldn't be a threat, so Lucas could have focused on taking the Lightning Axe or the Simian Spirit Guide, and just the Lightning Axe was, again, Jonathan's only discard outlet. So that meant that by going Through the Reach and then discard Lightning Axe, Jonathan would have been stranded with this 15/15 that did nothing, a Simian Spirit Guide, a card in the dark, and 2 Goryo's Vengeance that did nothing. So I think here Lucas would have been better served in that manner. And now he's forced to take the Simian Spirit Guide.
Yep. Looks like Winston #1 is going to hit the bin here for Jonathan Zhang.
Yeah.
With Lucas Siow kind of priced into it, as you mentioned.
One thing that I did like about Lucas's play here is that he recognized that he would have lost to any mana source, and he decided, I'm not going to double down on my mistake by taking a Goryo's Vengeance. I mean, I say it's a mistake. It's not. It was.
Was that another? That was another Simian Spirit Guide off the top.
Yeah, but by discarding the Simian Spirit Guide, you avoid it. And so I say that was an error. It may not have been necessarily. It was maybe a judgment call. But like here the Thoughtseize was a perfect draw. Being able to take that Through the Breach and avoid this problem for good.
Jesus, Siow has been sailing quite close to the wind here now. But Jonathan Zhang once again doing some quick maths to figure out whether he's going to be able to once again perpetrate some shenanigans with his Simian Spirit Guide. But Thoughtseize, as you mentioned, steadying the ship a little bit here for Siow.
Well, it means now that, let's see, how big are these turn requests? We got sorcery, creature, instants, so they're free 4s. No land is a little strange, but can happen, of course. So here, Lucas will put Jonathan down to 7. Yeah, taking the Lightning Axe here is correct, but yeah, this is really tough because essentially... Okay, the Collective Brutality here is perfect. You get to take the Lightning Axe and the Through the Reach, and you're leaving Jonathan with almost no outs, which is really what you want to do here.
So Collective Brutality now is going to continue to strip the hand of Zhang. That is the 5th discard spell that Siow has played. I think apart from the Tamagotchis, those are the only cards that he's actually played discard spells now, because he's escalated the Collective Brutality here. And Zhang has taken a real pasting from these Goyfs here, and... I mean, it's quite a feat to see how Siow has just really invalidated one of the... is it a better draw from Jonathan Zhang? I mean, he kept drawing cards that seemed to put him in a good position, but Siow just had the way to tear it apart.
To be honest, I was really shocked that he took that second Goryo's Vengeance rather than the Through the Breach there, because he gave Jonathan an out.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah. Had he take the Through the Breach, Jonathan had no outs, and by taking that Goryo's Vengeance, well, basically he gave Jonathan an out. He didn't get it.
Well, that is that, my friends. We aren't going to have a chance to finish off this match here, and of course a result here will be yours as soon as it's in our hands. We'll know. We'll be able to tell you exactly what happened there with the game. Lucas Siow did manage, in fact, to take out the match after having won game number 1. That is that for round number 11, my friends. Stick with us after this break. We'll be back with round number 12 here at GP Toronto.